Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I have a coworker who we exchange Happy Fridays every Friday morning, and he does better at it than I do. But anyway, he stopped by my office yesterday afternoon because he knew I was going to be out, and he said, "Hey, Happy Friday, Caleb, because you're not going to be here tomorrow." So he's pretty good at that. Can all of you hear me in the back well enough? Okay, great. So last fall, we took, my wife Lois and I took our children to see the ocean. Been the first time they had seen the ocean, so it was fun to see their joy and amazement at the ocean. You know, the ocean is so majestic, and yet it's also it can also be an enemy, and it causes separation and so on. Imagine you are a sailor and shipwrecked on a cold, windy, harsh island 300 miles south of New Zealand, so that's getting down to the neighborhood of Antarctica. And there are 5 of you together. Can you survive? And can you survive each other? So you may have heard this question before. If you were going to be shipwrecked on an island and you could take one book with you, what book would it be? Well, this one writer, William Buckley, he said, I would take a book on shipbuilding. Anyway, so true story, the ship that wrecked in January 1864, so for context, that was the Civil War time in the United States, shipwrecked on Auckland Island. And on board were a Frenchman, 2 Englishmen, a Norwegian, and a Portuguese. The ship did not completely disintegrate, so they were able to rescue some supplies to help them survive on this uninhabited, harsh island. The climate was damp and stormy. There were vicious, blood-sucking bugs that would latch onto them and not let go. And the men started to get sick over time because of their limited diet. They were eating sea lions that they clubbed to death. But they managed to survive together for a year and a half. So some of their accomplishments, they built a crude cabin with a fireplace, and they used 5,000 bundles of thatch that they tied around the outside for insulation. They made clothes from sea lion skins. They took turns cooking, and they took turns in the evenings having school where they would teach each other things that they knew that the others didn't know, like mathematics or French. Meanwhile, 4 months later in May of the same year, another ship wrecked on the same island about 20 miles away. There was 25 people on board that ship. 19 of them survived the crash, and they huddled at the foot of a 300-foot tall cliff for protection, right there where they wrecked. The stronger ones tried to lead the other ones to a better place of protection that they found about 200 yards away, but a lot of the group didn't have enough willpower to even move. They just laid down. And it wasn't long before several of them died. So they were on completely different ends of the island from the first group, and they never knew that there were other sailors on the same island. They never crossed paths. But things did not go so well for the second group. For starters, they weren't able to rescue anything from the ship, or very little from the ship. They didn't have anything to eat. And it wasn't long before one of the men suggested that they draw lots to see who would be the first one to be killed for the others to eat. So how's that for building team morale? So this prompted one of the more resourceful men to leave the group because he was afraid that he would be clunked on the head in the nighttime, and he took the matches with him. He did come back later. So this group of men was a disaster. They didn't band together. The officers kept treating the rest of the crew like they were lower than them, and that the crew needed to serve the officers. They didn't work together. They didn't look out for each other. So within 3 months, all but 3 of those 19 were dead. And so those 3 survivors made it 1 year until a passing ship rescued them. And back to the first group, they made it 1.5 years before they were rescued. So one of those groups had relationships that worked, and the other group didn't. Their challenge was just not the sea and the harsh climate. The challenge was also each other. And that's the same with our daily work. We have the challenges of the work, and we have the challenges of each other. So today we're going to talk about relationships that work. Your job description probably doesn't say anything like you must get along in it, but that's part of our jobs. It's part of the success of our work. We have relationships with coworkers, whether that's our peers or our subordinates or our bosses. We have relationships with clients. We have relationships with vendors, suppliers. And a lot of you are tough construction guys, and I'm a wimpy office worker. But you know what? People are the same no matter where you work. There's the people problems are very much the same because people are the same. So if you were going to guess what kind of personality I have, because I'm talking about relationships, what kind of personality do you think I have? You might think, I'm going to guess that you think I'm an outgoing person and I love to be around people. And I get a lot of energy from that. Well, that's not true. That's not me. I don't, at work, at break time, I'm not the one that's at the center of the group telling stories and everyone's listening to me. I don't get energy from being around people. I'm not a people person. I've had trouble getting along with people all of my life. I remember very well punching a fellow first grader in the stomach at school. We were playing tag. I caught her very heroically. I caught her, and she said, I said, I tagged you. And she said, no, you didn't. We had an argument, and I just settled the argument about punching her in the stomach. Not good. And my fourth grade teacher wrote on my report card one time, concentrate on neatness in your schoolwork and try not to let games get you upset. One time, jumping forward, one time after I had been gone on vacation, a coworker gave me this little cartoon when I came back. It was a coworker that I had not gotten along with so well at one point. It's a John and Garfield cartoon, so the cat. And John, I guess, had been gone because he said, did you miss me? And Garfield says, yes, I did, John. In fact, I wasn't done missing you. Would you mind leaving again? So I wasn't done missing you. So while I'm not a people person, so to speak, I believe it's important to get along. Why? Well, on a spiritual level, that's what God requires. Hebrews 12:14, follow peace with all men, or pursue peace with all men. It's a blessing to our coworkers when we're easy to get along with. On a personal level, our work goes so much better and we can enjoy the day so much more when we could get beyond the friction, tension, irritation that we have with our coworkers. I had a friend from church tell me one time when he was a lot younger, they were doing excavating, and he got so upset with his coworker, he was jealous of the guy because the other guy got to operate the machinery and he didn't. And he ended up throwing a rock at him and it hit him. Anyway, it just caused a lot of grief in their relationship. And then on an organizational or a business level, the less tension and infighting there is, the more effective and profitable, efficient the business is going to be. I know this is really far out, but a news report last year said that more than 1/4 of Japanese coworkers taking part in a survey admitted that the thought of killing their boss had crossed their mind on at least one occasion. That was 1/4 of the Japanese workers. Closer home, one study from 2008 says that employees in America spend almost 3 hours each week dealing with conflict at work. So I don't know if you can identify with that or not, but that's a lot of lost productivity. You know how hard it is to focus when your mind is whirling, spinning with thoughts, with irritation, and you're thinking how to get back against that person, or you're just trying to figure out how to deal with the situation because you're upset or distressed, your emotions are high, and that's just not good for us personally or for the business. So when something is broken, we say that it doesn't work. If my pen does not write, I say it doesn't work. If the plan is not going well, we say it's not working. So we want to have relationships that work. Not only do they function well, they work, but they allow us to get work done. Now, my purpose here this morning is not to have you become a teddy bear that has warm, fuzzy feelings towards your coworkers all the time. That's not why I'm here. I simply want you to be able to have relationships that enable you, for a start, to get the job done with a minimum of conflict and relational stress. Relationships that work are work. You might say, I have a coworker I simply cannot like. Well, I'm not here to tell you that you have to like that person. I believe that you and me can get along with somebody. We can have a relationship that works, even if I am not particularly fond of them. It helps us to understand that there are different levels of working relationships. And Merv, if you'd be willing to come up here and I will illustrate this a little bit. The first level, which is very basic level, is coexistence. You coexist. So this could be symbolized by a handshake. Good morning, Merv. How was your weekend?
It was awesome.
Great. And we work together peacefully, but we don't have that extra level of friendship. We have a business-like interaction. We're polite and kind to each other. And we probably don't share a lot of jokes with coworkers that we're simply coexisting with. We're side by side. But then a step up from that is camaraderie, where you're actually friends and you enjoy working together and you have friendly interaction. So we could symbolize this with a high five. Merv, great job on winning that contract.
Thank you. Thanks for your help.
Yeah, glad to do it. And you might talk about funny things from the weekend, and you're probably, at this level, you're not even polite and respectful all the time, most likely. But that's okay because you're friends. And hopefully a lot of you have this kind of relationship with your coworkers. And then there's another level yet beyond camaraderie, and that's connection. And we could symbolize this if I put my arm around his shoulder, and we might share more heart-to-heart things like, Merv, I hear you're getting married soon. I have a few suggestions that I learned from my own marriage, and like that.
Love to hear it.
Okay, thanks. So you're really close to your coworker on a heart-to-heart level, and you can share personal things with them. So those three levels we're beginning with the basic level, coexistence, and then camaraderie is the next level, and then a heart-to-heart connection is the third level. And the levels 2 and 3, those last two levels, are where you have the most satisfaction and most rewards, and the best morale at work. It has all kinds of benefits for us personally and for the whole business. But at a minimum, you need to be at the first level where you can coexist peacefully with the people that you're around. Even if I'm not particularly fond of someone, I can still speak respectfully to them. I can still be kind to them. And so if you find yourself upset, angry, or unwilling to speak to someone, you're not even on this scale of coexistence at all. Here's a tip. Think of it this way. You wouldn't get frustrated and angry with a client or a customer, and if you did, you wouldn't show it. And so do serve your coworkers like you would serve a customer. You would encourage them, support, listen to, help them instead of yelling at them. So once I had a coworker that we had a lot of stress, but over the years, this person became a friend of mine. And so that's what can happen when we work at it. Consider what c.s.lewis wrote in Mere Christianity. Don't waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, we find one of the great secrets. When you are behaving as if you love someone, you will presently come to love him. I also want to mention there's a healthy kind of conflict where you can challenge a coworker's ideas and have some back and forth, and that's where innovation and improvement happen. But you have to have the groundwork of kindness and respect in place first. Now I want to talk about two mindset shifts that we need to make. There are two mistakes that we make in thinking about situations, and these can become a mindset. So what's a mindset? Well, Jell-O sets, concrete sets, and our minds set to it. It's the way we think about something. It's our habit. So two mistakes that we make in our thinking is that the trouble we're having is all the other person's fault. If they would just see things the way we see them, the problem would be resolved. Like a comedian said, anyone driving slower than you is an idiot. Anyone driving faster than you is a maniac. And then the second mistake that we make is that I think that I can see the whole situation and I understand it the way it really is. So learning to think differently, and it is a learning process, is extremely important. So the first mindset shift that we need to have is that we need to understand that we need to work on ourselves and not work on trying to change our coworkers. If I was to ask you which person that you work with needs the most help, needs the most growth or change, who would you name? So let me guess that someone immediately jumps to your mind that you think has a problem and they need to change. They have some issues. But if you would ask the Apostle Paul this question, he might answer, that person is me. I'm the one that needs the most help. Because he wrote this to Timothy, this is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptation that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief, of whom I'm the worst one. Paul's perspective was that my primary responsibility is myself. In my circle, the one that should be the most concerned about how I act, how the people act, is me. We can't force our coworkers to stop irritating us. We aren't likely to be successful in trying to get them to change, but we can change ourselves. Here's a twist on the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know it's me. So after a spat or conflict with a coworker, it's easy to blame circumstances. I was too busy and I didn't respond well. We could blame our feelings. I was having a bad day. We could blame the other person. He was just being so unreasonable. Now, any of these things can be true, but it doesn't acknowledge the role that I have, the power that I have to improve the relationship. It's hardly ever only the other person's fault. There's two of us involved here, and one of them's me. So here's a question to ask yourself. In what way am I contributing to this problem? What was it about me, my actions or words that helped lead to where we're at now? So let me give you an example from home. Last summer, I stepped into my shed one evening, and it was a mess. And it wasn't the first time. Bikes, balls, toys just strewn all over the place. And I feel frustrated. Okay, it's my children's fault, right? They're the ones that left it that way. But if I ask myself the question, in what way did I contribute to this situation? I start thinking about, okay, I never really did the work of training my children how to put their things away right. So who's really to blame here? It's me. So the advantage of this question can help us two things. It helps us pinpoint areas where we can do better, and it keeps us from blaming others for everything. So I'm not saying that it's always our fault and we need to blame ourselves for everything that goes wrong. But many times we do contribute in some way to the problem. And we won't be able to see this unless we can step back and think about this question. So the second mindset shift then that we need to make is, the first one was working on ourselves instead of trying to change the other person. The second one is learn to look at things from other people's perspective. This is a huge change, and we should try to make it our natural way of thinking. It's actually part of the golden rule. Can we learn to step back and see what my coworkers see when they look at a situation? What issues are important to them? What do they see? What do they feel when they look at me? How do I come across to them? What is it about myself that I'm missing? Looking at things from the other person's perspective helps us in these two ways. First, it helps us see our blind spots. So trucks, big trucks have a sign on the back that says, "You're in my blind spot." That means the driver cannot see your vehicle well. And we have blind spots too, and there are problems or faults that we have that we don't realize. Blind spots are a little bit like bad breath. Everyone around you knows you have it, but you don't. One time a coworker told me that I intimidated him. Well, I had no idea because I always had looked up at him as the cool person who was like a notch above me. And that was a blind spot that I had, that I intimidated him. Looking at things from the other person's perspective also helps us understand where other people are coming from. So have you ever said, "I can't understand why he did that"? And we usually say it in frustration. Well, I suggest that we should try not to say that because we mean it as a reflection on the other person. Like, I can't understand why he was so stupid. However, it's not a reflection on them, it's a reflection on us. What I mean by that is, it's a reflection on our inability to understand the other person. Because you have a reason for everything that you do, right? It makes sense to you at the time that you did it. That's why you did it. Others are the same way. What they did made sense to them at the time. So if we cannot understand why they did something, that's a reflection on us and our inability to think about to understand the other person's perspective. In his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey tells us, seek first to understand, then to be understood. This means withholding judgment and trying to get the other side of the story. So I have a coworker who works from home. He actually oversees some of my responsibilities. And I was getting a little frustrated because he was not answering my emails well. Things were falling through the cracks. And then he told me, or I learned, that he's a church leader, and his church was having difficulties. He was spending a lot of time on church problems. And so that helped me to be patient when I understood where he was at. It helped me not get frustrated. So let's say you have a coworker that's grumpy and practically falling asleep in the afternoons, and you're getting irritated about it, and you're thinking about talking to the boss about it, and then you apply this principle, and you consider his perspective, and you remember that he has a new baby at home, and you understand, oh, he's probably up in the night helping his wife, and that helps you understand and be sympathetic with him because you understand his perspective, his situation. You can do this by mentally thinking about what the other person's situation is, and you can also do it just simply by asking them about it. So I have asked coworkers already for feedback on me to get their perspective on me and how I could do better. And let me share something that they told me. One person said, "Your physical presence is intimidating to most people. You have a tendency to frown more than you have a tendency to smile. Combining a frowning face with an immense frame, I don't have an immense frame, I'm tall, and you can be kind of scary looking." And then another person said, "You point out others' poor logic without tact." And that's right, I don't have tact. And when conversations drag on, when folks are processing out loud, sometimes you get antsy for the drivel to dry up so you can get something done. I like the way you can ask whether we're done here and can pick up later or something, but sometimes you might say something that makes others feel a little bit dumb. And so when I hear feedback like that, I know that it's right, and I know I have something to work on. So now I want to move to practices that you can cultivate in your life, things you can do. And again, this is not something that you try to do to the other person. This is something that you do to yourself. The first thing is stay in your place. So what does this mean? So let me give you an example. One morning, I had a conversation with a coworker. It was a Monday morning. I asked him if he had a good weekend. And he was yawning and talking about how he had gotten to bed late the night before, the typical Monday morning gripes. And so in contrast to Daniel, I was feeling fine that morning. And I told him how I like to structure my weekend so I'm well rested and ready to hit the ground running on Monday morning. Well, we didn't have any conflict about that. But later I realized that probably wasn't the wisest response, because he did not ask for my opinion on weekends and how to relate to Monday morning and all of that. He wasn't interested at all in my philosophy of Monday mornings. And furthermore, he was a fairly new coworker. I didn't know him well. He didn't know me well. So I didn't really have the standing to make those comments. So we get in trouble when we get out of our place. In effect, we become a meddler. So what do you do when something somebody else is doing is bothering you? So for example, a coworker displays in his workspace something that you disagree with, like a demotivational poster from despair.com. You can buy these, or you can get them as wallpaper or as desktop screens on computers. Here's an example of a poster like that. Procrastination, hard work often pays off after time, but laziness pays off now. And here's another one. Aspiration. I hear the call to do nothing, and I'm doing my best to answer it. So should you ask him to take down the poster? Or you can put your own situation there. In situations where we're not sure whether we should get involved, we can ask these questions. First of all, is my point of view generally respected by this person? So if he's often antagonistic to me on other issues, or if he has a completely different worldview, or view of life, he's probably not going to respond well. If you speak up, it could cause the relationship to deteriorate. The second question is this within my jurisdiction to address? Sometimes we are tempted to get involved in situations that's really none of our business. The person who injects his own opinion and advice into other people's work can be at best a meddler and at worst a bully. Of course, if you're the boss, sometimes there's a lot of things that are in your jurisdiction to address. And then the last question to ask, have I invested enough in the relationship up to this point? You know that relationships are like a bank account. You cannot draw more out of the bank account than you put into it. And making a difficult or a request like this can be a withdrawal, and you need to have something invested in the relationship first. So as a general rule, if you can't answer yes to at least two of these questions, you're better off to stay quiet. So that's what I'm talking about, staying in your place. Then the second thing you can do, we're moving on from staying in your place to the next practice to cultivate, is simply wielding the power of love. God gave us the tools that we need to get along. God made us, and he knows how to help us work together. I'm using the word love here, wield the power of love, to describe these weapons of God. If you want to fight someone, use God's weapons of love. live out the belief that good is stronger than evil, that kindness is stronger than hate. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him a drink. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. That means doing something good for the other person. So I have already taken freshly baked bread and given it as a gift to a coworker that we weren't best friends. And it was to show that person that I wanted to reach out and do the right thing. It was a way to put coals of fire on their head. It signals that I want to do my part. Believe in the power of prayer. Prayer really can make a difference. Pray for yourself that you have a good attitude. Pray for the other person. Ask God to bless them. And that really is difficult, to ask God to bless somebody that you don't like, but it changes your own heart. Third, moving on from wielding the power of love, find something to appreciate in your coworker. There's a saying that every cloud has a silver lining. Every person has a silver lining too. Every person has something good about them, something that you can appreciate, a strength, some way that they contribute. There's a saying that you get more out of what you focus on. So focusing on a coworker's weakness or character trait that we don't like actually makes it get bigger and bigger in our minds. So one of my preachers at church, he has a habit of saying, but anyway, in his sermons. And so one time I told my wife, I don't remember how this was exactly, but I was thinking about counting how many times he said this certain phrase during a message. Okay, is that focusing on the problem? And it's going to get bigger and bigger in my mind if I do that. So my wife encouraged me not to. So if all you can see is your coworker's weaknesses, or what you perceive as weaknesses, pick a weakness and examine the other side of it, the flip side. We sometimes say that one man's trash is another man's treasure, which is just a way of saying that people see things differently. So I once had a coworker that I thought was kind of rude, but he was also extremely efficient. That's the positive side of him. Another coworker was possibly a micromanager, but he could also be appreciated for his level of detailed organization. The person you think of that's stubborn, someone else might see as a person of integrity or vision. Take a look at your hand, and you'll see something odd about it. There's 4 tall, graceful digits here, and there's one awkward one that's completely different from the rest. He doesn't fit in. Well, this shows you would not want to live without your thumb, even though it's very different. There's certain things you cannot do without your thumb. So this shows that God has a design for the different people in your life. This is the guy that you don't like, but God has a way that he works together with you and to get things done. God designed us all different. Don't try to get everyone else to be just like you. Moving on from finding something to appreciate in every coworker is to grow your humility. So compared to everyone else in this room, how good, I'm going to use the example of driving, how good of a driver do you think that you are on a scale of 1 to 10? Are you a 5? Are you a 10? Well, in one survey of driving skill, 93% of the participants rated themselves to be in the top 50%. 93% of the people thought they would be in the top 50%. So somebody's got to be in the bottom 50%, right? And it's going to be half of us. So why wouldn't it be me? Paul warns us in Romans 12:3 not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think. There's supposedly a politician who said, I haven't been wrong since 1961 when I thought I made a mistake. The Bible guarantees that you will have trouble when you're proud. By pride comes nothing but strife, but with the well-advised is wisdom. So how can we grow in humility? I'm not promoting a false humility where we withdraw and we don't contribute and we say, I'm no good. But rather acknowledge and use your strengths. Don't pretend or hide your weaknesses. Don't pretend that you don't have any weaknesses. If you're good at something, it's okay to admit it, enjoy it, and do your best. And if a coworker compliments you, be humble enough to thank them. Take it to heart. Let it go to your heart, not your head. And let it inspire you to keep doing your best. Do your best rather than trying to be the best. We don't have to appear to be better than everyone else. Our goal is simply to be the best that we can be. Another way to grow in humility is to throw away your yardstick, which means stop measuring yourself against other people. When we carry a yardstick, we have the never-ending chore of putting other people down so that we measure up higher. That's one reason the Pharisees hated Jesus. They didn't measure up to him, and they felt threatened. So our worth does not come from our accomplishments or how we compare against other people. Our worth comes from being a child of God, the person that God created and that God loves. Another way to grow your humility is to open yourself up for feedback. I talked about that a little bit earlier. Norman Vincent Peale said, "The trouble with most of us is that we would rather be ruined by praise than saved by criticism." So here's a humility check. How often do you use these 4 humble phrases? Like these 4. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I need help. Or I don't know. Those are 4 humble phrases. How often do you use them? Saying something like, I'm sorry I was wrong, can have a big impact. Listen to this poem. The quarrel. I quarreled with my brother. I don't know what about. One thing led to another, and somehow we fell out. The start of it was slight. The end of it was strong. He said he was right. I knew he was wrong. We hated one another. The afternoon turned black. Then suddenly my brother thumped me on the back and said, oh, come on. We can't go on all night. I was in the wrong. So he was in the right. In addition to growing our humility, another practice you can cultivate is practice not getting offended. So getting offended is easy. I can get offended about anything without even trying. One time, someone came to me and said, something you said yesterday struck me sideways. Now, I don't know what struck me sideways means, but it was something that I said he didn't like. And so he told me what I had said that he didn't appreciate, and I could hardly understand why it bothered him. It was just such a simple, non-threatening comment, but yet it had offended him. So I kept thinking about that over days and weeks until I realized that I was getting offended that he had gotten offended by me. So sometimes people do hurt us, and it's a serious offense. But I'm thinking more about the smaller things where we start holding a grudge when we really could overlook it or take it in stride. Someone said, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I heard a preacher say one time that he had made up his mind never to get offended. I don't know if he was successful or not, but that's a good intention to have. Why do we get offended? It usually has to do with pride and protecting ourselves. Someone else gets the position or the promotion that we wanted, or they make a remark that we take to be disrespectful, or someone assumes something that's not true about us, or it can be as simple as someone laughing at a mistake that we made. Getting offended happens when we take something too personally. Do you remember the time Jesus was traveling and he sent James and John on ahead to a village, a Samaritan village, to prepare for his arrival? And the Samaritan village told them, we don't want Jesus to come here. James and John got offended, and they asked Jesus, can we call down fire from heaven and burn out this village? They took it too personally. Getting offended happens when we make unfounded assumptions about someone else. After David killed Goliath, and that really got everyone's attention, King Saul became jealous of him. He believed that David was a threat, there was nothing further from the truth. David was King Saul's strongest supporter. We make the same mistake when we assume something wrong about a coworker. Getting offended happens when we major on minors. Proverbs 19:11, the discretion of a man defers his anger, and it is his glory to pass over a transgression. Another Bible example would be Haman. One person didn't bow down to him, and he became offended, and it led to his death, his own death. Our coworkers will at times be unkind, either intentionally or unintentionally. But our response makes all the difference in whether we can continue to have a good relationship. Don't major on minors. Getting offended happens less when we understand and know our coworkers well. Think about your closest friends. How often do they offend you? Even if they make an unkind comment. Not very often, because we understand our closest friends. We understood that they didn't mean it that way. This illustrates how communication and strong relationships can fend off offenses. There's a saying that imagination starts where communication stops. When we aren't communicating, we start imagining the worst about the other people's motives, and that's where offenses start to happen. Martin Luther King Jr. said, people fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other. So when faced with an offense, what can we do? Give the benefit of the doubt. Remember that getting offended is a choice that we make. 1 Peter 4:8 says, love covers a multitude of sins. We can assume it was likely unintentional. We can decide not to take it personally. And we can use the situation as a stepping stone to grow to the next level in our personal lives. Okay, moving on from practicing not getting offended, this is the last one. Be encouraging and positive. Think about your conversations at work this week. What topics did you discuss? Did you make mostly negative or mostly positive comments? Two kinds of negativity that often shows up at work are pessimism and cynicism. So a pessimist thinks that if things appear to be going better, you must have overlooked something. The light at the end of the tunnel is actually an oncoming train. That's a pessimistic comment. And then cynicism is when we cast doubts and assume the worst about other people's motives. There's a multitude of cynical jokes out there. Here's one about work and coworkers. This is actually about a committee. A committee of 3 gets things done if 2 don't show up. Or here's another one. Teamwork is essential. It allows you to blame somebody else. So those are cynical jokes. There's a lot of problems with pessimism and cynicism, but one of those problems is the impact it has on other people, on our coworkers. I understand, I agree that being negative is an easy way to connect with other people. You make a negative comment about the boss, and you can get a connection going with your coworkers, but it's cheap. But eventually you have a whole culture of negativity. So what are some simple ways to communicate more positively? Well, try saying a friendly good morning to each coworker that you meet, that you run into. I had a coworker once, his goal was to say good morning to the other person before they said it to him every day. So speaking courteously to everyone at work makes them feel respected and not just like an animal or a machine. You can give compliments. I agree with Mark Twain. He said, I can live for 2 months on a good compliment. And think about this. You get more of what you compliment. We talked earlier about you get more of what you focus on. You get more of what you compliment. The grass is greener where you water it. Choosing to emphasize what's good and right encourages more good and right behavior. So you're not sure what to say that can be encouraging and positive? Here's a couple of suggestions. I'm glad you're helping us with this. Good idea. That turned out nice. Can you show me how you did it? You're good at that. Do you mind if I give you a hand? I hope the project goes well for you. Here's a quote from Blaise Pascal. Cold words freeze people, hot words scorch them, and bitter words make them. Let me start over. Cold words freeze people, and hot words scorch them, and bitter words make them bitter, and wrathful words make them wrathful. Kind words also produce their own image on men's souls, and a beautiful image it is. They smooth and quiet and comfort the hearer. Now, I'm going to sit down. Don't do what I did. My wife and I, a couple years ago, went to a relational wisdom seminar in DC, and it was a great day of encouraging ways learning about relational wisdom. Then on the way home, trying to navigate in the city traffic, which I'm not good at, and we were missing our turn, and I yelled at my wife for not helping me navigate better. See, and this is difficult, and this is real life, but we can work at it. We can do better. Thank you all for listening, and have a great day.